Hello, everyone. Sorry we are late. There was a few technical hiccups, but we're here in the end. We thought we might have to create a new stream and everything, but thankfully we're here finally. So this will be a very good one, a very exciting one. I'm joined by my good friend from the Xano team, Daniel. How's it going, Daniel?
Great. So happy to be here, Matthew, and can't
Yes.
believe we're doing this together. So for those who don't know, me and Matthew have known each other for a few years now, before either of us worked for the companies that we work for right now. So this is super exciting.
Yeah, we were just saying before this went live, it's crazy how life turns out because we were chatting to each other at the No Code Summit almost a year ago now, and here we are. But this would be a super cool one into the deep dive into MCPs. In truth, before we went into this, I hadn't done any experimentation with the MCPs, and obviously before this, we'd done some testing, and it was in that testing that we went through everything, and Daniel showed me the MCPs, and I set it up in WeWeb, and it opened a Pandora's box of what you can do. And I was saying to Daniel, now in my own time, I'm thinking, how can I add MCPs to my own projects and everything? So super excited for this one. It's going to be very cool. So without further ado, shall I just hand the stage to you, Daniel?
Yeah, go for it.
Super.
All right. Can you see my slideshow?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm going to quickly just run through a little deck that I put together just to help everyone understand a little bit more about Xano and MCPs. So for those who don't know, Xano is a visual backend development platform. I'm Daniel Petro. I'm a developer advocate at Xano. And what Xano is your entire backend. So that's a scalable managed server, which is single tenant, and you have a flexible database. And then the majority of what you'd be doing in Xano is with our visual API builder. So which allows you to create logic visually and with code. So let's dive right in. MCP. So I think those of us who are in, the AI space, kind of like on the bleeding edge, I would say, know what this is, but I think a lot of people still don't. So it stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's an open standard developed by Anthropic. And what it is like a universal way for AI models to connect with external systems, data sources, and tools. A lot of people like to call it like a USB-C port for AI. So it's just a standard that allows AI systems to interact with all of these things. So the way I like to describe it to people is actually, I've heard this somewhere else, but it's essentially giving AI eyes and hands so it can see and do things with other systems. Does that make sense, Matthew?
It makes sense to me.
Cool. All right, so I'm gonna, jump a little deep here and discuss some of the architecture. So the AI chat apps like Claude Desktop or Cursor, these are MCP clients, and they have a built-in AI agent. And your MCP server contains a bunch of different tools. And so what these tools could be, they could be, API endpoints, they could be database transactions, they could be, a calculator, it could be any kind of business logic you want. And that allows the AI agent to use those tools. So this is how you would traditionally, or how people are, using MCP servers and clients right now. But we at Xano have created one of the easiest ways to create MCP servers, but also MCP clients. So what that is essentially think of it like the API endpoint or the agent that processes your natural language prompt whenever you hit send in Claude Desktop or in Cursor or any other client. So we basically allow you to build that remotely. And you might be thinking, well, why would I want to do that? Why wouldn't I just, use these other tools that are available. There's a few different reasons. The biggest one I would say is security. So by having control over the agent, you can, choose different LLM providers. So like right here, you can see ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. You could also create different agentic systems using different models for different parts or different specialized agents or micro agents. And yeah, there's all kinds of other really cool things you can do. So for example, you could do, because all of this sits behind Xano authentication, it's super secure, but you can also do everything you would normally do in Xano. So you could basically have role-based access controls. So think about being on a team and you have myself and Matthew. So for me, I could, have access to servers A, B, and C, and then Matthew can have access to C, D, and E. Or you could even say we both have access to A, B, and C, but I have access to every tool in A, B, and C, while Matthew only has access to 10 tools in each of those. So does that make sense to you, Matthew?
Yes, and this might be jumping ahead, so apologies if it is, Daniel. And we kind of discussed this beforehand, and it won't be applicable for this build. But I think one very cool thing that you mentioned to me and might be worthwhile noting here is that we'll be chatting with our database. So the MCP per se will be interacting with Xano. But as you mentioned, you can also link it up to external tools. So the use case you gave me was Slack, for example. So you could have it look through a database, answer something about your database, and then maybe even interact with Slack and send a Slack message. So it works both ways, external tools and internally with your Xano.
Yeah, actually, I had a different slide that I was supposed to go into before this part, but I got too excited and I jumped ahead. So let me just back it up one step. Apologies, y'all. So why would you care about using MCPs? Not just because it's the new hype or buzz, but in my mind, it really is a game changer. And I know that word is losing its oomph these days, but it really solves like so many different problems as far as like integration complexity, having fragmented implementation, so different tools handling similar functions, data isolation, and it should also reduce maintenance. Because you don't essentially have to edit an API endpoint or a function and the tool itself. So you just edit the API endpoint or the function, and it's automatically reflected within the tool. And that's because of how Xano, the way we built it out. So, and I think another thing that people I get asked a lot is like, so why is this, any different than automation? And automation is like, really good for predictable or repeatable tasks, going from A to B, for example. But that is a little too rigid. If we think about how we get work done today, automations are great for those predictable A to B paths, but a lot of our work is more dynamic than that. We have these one-off tasks that we want to complete, and MCP servers give us that kind of ability to get more done without switching context. And what I mean by that is it really kind of enhances the user experience and unifies systems. And it breaks down the barriers of traditional UI. So think about, a task that you have to do, and it requires you to use 3 or 4 different tools to get this task done. And like everyone today, most of us are using AI to help us with our work. And I would say having to switch between different platforms and windows and then go, message your colleague. Imagine you could just do it all from one like power station, through one UI, through a chat interface that is, naturally how humans want to work and think. I find myself using speech to text more and more, especially like AI powered speech to text, because I can continue with a steady stream of consciousness and get more words per minute out than I can when I'm writing. So, yeah, I think that's the main gist of it, of what I wanted to address as far as why you should care about this. So apologies for jumping straight into the architecture before
No worries.
that. So yeah, back to here. This is pretty much what we're going to show today. And we're going to show a very simple version of this. And yeah, here is just some information about Xano. We do, similar to our friends at WeWeb, we do weekly orientation and office hours. And there are some other links if you want to follow us.
Super.
Awesome. All right. So should we hop straight into our project?
I think so. Let's get into the
Very cool.
the meat and bones.
Awesome. All right. So for those who aren't aware, this is what Xano looks like. You have your databases, your APIs, and we have this new section called AI tools. And then you have things like tasks, and library contains a whole world of other things, which I won't dive into today. But what we have here is we've built out a CRM, so a custom CRM for just, storing company information, contacts, and tracking deals. So when you can easily create something like this using our AI assistant, and it'll go ahead and generate this schema for you, and it'll also generate the CRUD API endpoints for you. So you can see right here, we've got our deals and we've got our contacts, our companies, etc. So if I go over to our AI tools, we can see we have a couple of MCP servers that we built out when we were testing this. And if you want to learn more about it, there's information right here. But I want to go ahead and dive in directly. So you can see inside this server right here, we have a few tools, and I'm going to go ahead and delete these. How does that sound? Let's do this together.
Super. And just while you do that, Daniel, I forgot to mention that actually the tables were built using the database assistant. So when I created this workspace, I used AI entirely to create these tables.
That is awesome. Yeah. And I want to just shout out Matthew. He put in a lot of work into this stream, and really got us, to an awesome place where we can provide as much value to y'all today. So
I appreciate it. It's very much joint. I appreciate it, Daniel, but it's very much a joint effort.
All right, cool. Well, if we want, what do you think we should do? Should we do like this companies, so we can get a list of our companies? So traditionally, this is how you would configure this API endpoint, which is automatically generated for you. You could pass in a name, an industry, or a website. These are the different fields within the table, which you can see linked right here. But so I can go ahead and I can run this with nothing, and it should return all of these companies right here. And in order to create an MCP tool out of this, all I have to do is hit the three dots up here, use as AI tool, and it automatically configures this for me. I'm going to go ahead and choose our CRM server. And
sorry, Daniel, just before you jump straight into this, I'm just thinking if someone's brand new to basically web development, they see, hey, I want to add AI agents to my web app. And they think, okay, so how does this backend stuff work? just at a very high level, could you go through endpoints in terms of, okay, so you have a database that stores data. How do you then interact with that database? We obviously know it's endpoints, but for someone who's brand new, has zero context, could you go through that quickly at a very high level?
Yeah, so API endpoints are just ways for systems to communicate and transfer information. Honestly, the best resource that I could give you is in our Xano documentation. So let me just pull it up real quick. So if you go to docs.xano and go to using these docs, shout out to Chris Coleman, who maintains our documentation at Xano. He is an awesome rock star and has put so much effort into these. This is where I started learning Xano before I joined the company over 2 years ago. And there's all kinds of great information. Where should I start? And then you're going to figure out under these key concepts, it'll basically give you information on what an instance is, what's a workspace, what is a back end, what is a front end. We go far beyond what we do at Xano to help people understand, how to get started in software development, essentially. So there's this great video on what's an API, but we also go into the software development lifecycle as well. So you can go ahead and find everything you want in our documentation.
Very cool.
Thanks for bringing that up, Matthew.
No worries, because we obviously use this in and out, and it's one of those things that if you're brand new, zero context, it might not make too much sense, so it's very easy for us to brush over.
For sure. I'm going to go ahead and discard this and just show you how easy it is once again. So we're inside an API endpoint. We hit the 3 dots, use as AI tool. I'm going to go ahead and select my MCP server that I want to add that tool to. And it pre-populated this for me, but I think I want to be a little more verbose because the more context the tool name has, I think is better for AI. So I'm going to say, get all companies. And I think that is a much better description. So it automatically redirected me into the tool itself. So you'll notice that we have a little robot icon here. So we're inside that AI tool. And we can see that we have this run endpoint here. And essentially what it is we're just wrapping this endpoint in a tool. So in that protocol for the AI to understand how to use it. So we've got different inputs that the AI can use and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, publish. And should we do another, Matthew?
Just before you do that, actually, in the settings, you can change the description that's passed the AI to give it context, right? That might be worthwhile going through.
Yeah, for sure. So we can edit our MCP server here and we can give it instructions. You can see I've already provided one here, and this will be passed to the agent. And we could also go ahead and close this, and we can see the request history. So you can see me and Matthew are having fun right before the stream, messing around with it. And it works exactly like our request history does. So we can see the inputs here, we can see the output, and everything. So
yes, and you can also do this at a tool level, right? So you can give a description for the actual server itself, but individually for each tool, you can also give a different description as context, right? So for the get all companies, you can give that its own description.
Exactly. And actually, I noticed that we are about the halfway mark right now. So I'm going to go ahead and run through.
We did start a little late, so I think we might be able to run over a bit.
For sure. But I also want to give some time for us to experience it in the front end. So if we hop into this post endpoint, so what we're seeing here is what I showed on the slide was the remote client. So because we're not going to be accessing this through something like Claude Desktop, we want to access it through our custom chat client built in WeWeb alongside our CRM. We need to build an endpoint that can be called whenever the user sends their message to the AI. And this is essentially our very basic agent. Okay, so what we're looking at here is our system prompt, our user query, and then our conversation history. And at the top here, I've just hard coded the server URL to the server that I created. And then we have this block right here, which lists the tools. So it's taking in that server URL, and you can make all of this dynamic. You can pass, like, call multiple servers and stuff like that. So yeah. And then it's secured behind Xano authentication. And what this part is doing is just formatting the JSON structure of the tools to work specifically with the OpenAI API, because that's what we're going to be using today.
Just sorry to interrupt you, Daniel, because we had a relevant question in the chat from Christian, and he asked, what LLM are you all using to power your agents?
Yeah.
And it's completely customizable, right?
For sure. Honestly, that's one of the things I love about Xano, is because I can just quickly iterate and test different AI or LLMs for different use cases. So for this example, we're going to be using OpenAI, and I believe we're using 4.1 mini for the tool request. And then for the chat completion, we're also using 4.1 mini. So, but depending on your use case, you're going to want to, just start testing different ones. And then if you're building out like micro agents, you might want to use like a 2.5 Flash model, and you might want to use like, a thinking model for the architect agent or the orchestrator, whatever you want to call it. But yeah. And the benefit of creating your remote client and your remote agents to power your clients is that not only can you build it a multi-agent with multi LLMs and use the best one for the job, but you can also configure those system prompts as well, which is something you can't really do when you're using a client like Claude Desktop.
And then just on that, Daniel, Christian had a quick follow-up question. He asked, okay, so we can use our own different deployments, e.g. OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, Gemini, etc.
Correct.
Super.
Awesome. Great question, Christian. I'm glad you asked that. So moving on, here is where we're making the OpenAI tool request. And then the response of this AI is going to call this tool right here. So you can see that we have the MCP call tool block right here, and the URL, the bearer token of the user. And then this is the tool name and the arguments. So the AI is telling us which one it chose to use based off of the user query, and then the arguments that it wants to pass into that tool. And then we complete the message right here and deliver the response.
Amazing.
And in our response, we're returning our assistant message. I don't think we are showing these in WeWeb, but you can display them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we hop into the front end.
Super. And then, by the way, because I know this was a bit much for me to create on my own, this is all available as a snippet, right? So if someone wants to completely clone this, put it into their workspace, they don't have to worry about setting any of this up. It's ready to go for them.
100%. And we really appreciate you doing that, Matthew.
No worries at all. Super. And then, sorry, just one final thing to recap then, Daniel, just to make sure I understand it correctly. So we have our database. We then have the tools that we've created, but to kind of connect the two and allow us to interact with them, we had to add this middle API per se that has access to the tools. And then obviously, because the tools are able to call our database, everything works in sync.
Exactly. And just as like for some additional clarity, I want to quickly just go over this get all companies endpoint. So you don't necessarily have to do it the way I did it with the 3 dots. This could technically be anything. So I could add a tool. And like I said, like this could be a calculator, right? And I could just build out whatever kind of logic I want the AI to do. So I could say, this is a decimal and, var1, and then we could do another one, and then we could do some math in here, even add an input for the AI to choose the operator, and it could be anything. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I don't want to use that. And the other thing is that I could have, instead of having this run API endpoint, because if we hop into that endpoint, all it is a query all records on our company table. So we could do it either way.
Super. This opened my eyes to the customization. It was when I realized just how much interactivity you have with this and how much customization there is. Not only, as we mentioned, being able to have it query your database and interact with your database in any way, shape, or form, but then also, we won't get into it in this stream, but interact with external tools, whatever that might be. There's such a world of possibilities with this that the world is your oyster, pretty much.
Exactly. Like this has been keeping me up at night. It's really hard to disconnect because, yeah, and I'm not just, drinking the Kool-Aid or on the hype train. This is really changing software development and like how we interact with software and AI.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. Super. So should we jump into the front end side?
Sounds great.
Amazing. So I will switch over to the WeWeb side. So I've got 2 tabs here. One is an example pre-cooked build, and another is the build we'll go through. Now, I'll do the same as Daniel did. I don't know how familiar our viewers are with WeWeb. This might be your first time seeing it. So I'll try to go through everything at a very high level. But we'll start with the example pre-cooked build. So this is what we will be building. We won't be building any of the web page itself. We'll be worrying about the chat interface, and we'll hook this up to what Daniel has built in Xano. And the premise of WeWeb is that you can build pretty much any day-to-day web application. And it all starts with this add panel where you can drag things onto the page. So for example, I could drag a button onto my page. The button then appears there. I can click onto it. And from here, I can do various things with it. So I could change its styling. If I wanted to, I can simply change the text color. There's settings that apply. So it depends on what element it is, but you have different settings available to you. So I could disable it. If I wanted to, I could add a left icon. And then we have workflows, which add logic to the element, which I'll show in a second. But that's the base premise. And then once you add something to the page, you can obviously have access to everything. So everything here is an element. I can change it however I want. I can add logic to it in the form of workflows. I can change its styling, its settings, whatever I want to do. So that's the premise. Because you can pretty much add anything you like to the page, set up whatever logic you like, style it whatever way you like. That's why I mentioned pretty much any day-to-day web application, you can build it inside of WeWeb. So there's 2 core things to get into. Just so you have a good understanding of how all this operates and how there's flexibility in WeWeb. And first is this binding button. So what bindings allow you to do is return any value in here and have it be used for that property. So for instance, this display property, if I wanted to only in certain situations display this element, so these deal cards, I could return dynamically true or false. So what's a good example? Let's say ID equals 13. Well, the item index is 0. It should only it would return true if the item index is 0, so it's the first item. So it should only return the first items, like we see. Or if I say item index equals 0, or item index equals 1, it shows the first 2 items. So the first 2 items in our list. So that's the premise of formulas, because you can pretty much put in whatever calculation you like here. to return what you need for that property. Again, it's just flexibility, and you can bind pretty much every property in WeWeb. So we'll unbind this. And the final thing to cover in terms of why there's flexibility is workflows. And what a workflow does is essentially allows you to execute actions when something happens. So here we have triggers. Maybe on this element, I want something to happen on click, on double click, on right click. There's various different triggers, and there's different triggers depending on the element it is. So this is a basic element. So these are the basic triggers per se. But maybe on this Kanban, where you can drag things, you'll have different triggers. So here, for example, we have an on-item move trigger. So when someone moves something in the Kanban, I want something to happen, I have access to that trigger. And then when that trigger happens, you can execute different actions. So maybe you want to change the value of a variable, maybe you want to fetch a collection, and I'll explain shortly what a collection is. Maybe you want to execute a different workflow, and then here you have Xano actions, which we'll show in a second, but that's the premise. You can execute actions when something happens, and as you can imagine, when you have so many triggers and so many different actions, there's a lot of things you can do. It's fully flexible. So I will delete this button. And just before we get into building the chat interface, I want to discuss how this basically interacts with Xano. So WeWeb is only a front-end builder. If you're not familiar with the differences between front-end and back-end, all that basically means is you build the UI here, and the core data storage and the core business logic that sits within your backend, the API endpoints that Daniel discussed, and now obviously the MCP related logic, WeWeb doesn't handle that. All it does is it allows you to build your designs, add logic to your designs, flexibility to your designs, and then you hook it up to your backend and pull in data. So for example, these are deals you see on the page. They're not perfectly named because I used the database assistant to randomly generate them. But all of these are deals in our database. If I go to Xano here, you can see they're all coming from this table. And how that works in the context of WeWeb is I have what's termed a collection, and I've added the Xano plugin. And because I've gone through these steps, there's a very seamless integration that we have with Xano, where you can simply add it as a plugin, and it automatically has access to all of the endpoints I've created. And so I just have an endpoint to get all the deals. I added it as the path here. So it uses that endpoint, and it returns all the deals that we see. And so now within the editor, I can very easily access that data and bind it as we saw. So in the context of the deals here, in this Kanban, I quite simply just have the items here bound, and I'm binding it to the deals data, which means all of the deal cards are repeated for that data. And then inside of each deal card, because it's repeated for all of the items in that data, I have access to the specific data fields of that item, which then introduces another world of possibilities, which I won't go into detail for, but hopefully that gives you broad context of just where the flexibility is. Final thing I will mention before I get into the AI chat is that this is a template on our marketplace. So if someone wants to download this after we're done, you're more than welcome to do so. And then as Daniel mentioned, we'll add the Xano endpoints that we're showing in the MCP related logic as a snippet. So you can basically get both of these as templates. They're ready out of the box.
Are we gonna actually update the template to include the AI assistant, or are they gonna need to follow this video to build it?
That's a good. They might need to. I'll check with the team because I don't know if we can update the template. But if not, they might need to follow this. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too hard, honestly, and I think it's better to like follow a video and build along instead of just installing it and kind of inspecting it. I mean, you can learn both ways, but I think you'll learn a little bit better from doing it yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So before we jump in, I do just want to show off a pre-cooked version of this, just to get an idea of what it is we'll build, because we won't jump straight into the designs. We'll actually cover some of the logic first. And the reason we'll cover the logic first instead of jumping straight into creating the designs is because it helps our AI build things. And I haven't actually discussed the AI, but we'll get into it when we get into the building. So I could say, what is our biggest deal? And this is already hooked up to the MCP.
We need to move our cameras, Matthew.
As in,
we're covering the chat bot.
the chat. Oh, sorry. Let me see if I can. I think I'll just disable the cameras for now.
Yeah, I disabled mine, and so I went away. I'm still here though.
Super. I'm still here as well. Right. Jumping back into it. This is the pre-cooked AI assistant. As I said, we'll build it shortly. But the idea will be it will be hooked up to the MCP that Daniel has built in Xano. So you can ask it questions. So as an example, I could say, what is our biggest deal? And when I do that, it will then search through the deals table. And it's asking me to qualify. Actually, I think you only created one to get all the companies so far, didn't you, Daniel?
Oh yeah, hold on. Let's go ahead and actually build that together real quick.
Super. I shall switch back to you.
All right. So let's go quickly to our API endpoints and let's go find that deals. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and say uses AI tool. And we're going to just say get all deals. I like being verbose. Oh, and it's already used in that server. And I'm glad that it told me that because I want to create it in this server. Wait. Say. All right, let's make sure everything should be good. All right, back to you, Matthew.
Thank you. Right, switching back. I will go over to here. And so if I now ask the same question, it should work, right? So what is our biggest deal?
Fingers crossed, demo gods.
Super. There we go. And just to make sure, can you see this? Because I haven't disabled my camera.
Yeah, we can
Okay,
see that.
super.
Awesome.
So yes, so this is what we will build when we switch over to the new one. And we'll obviously build the UI and hook it up to Xano. So I shall switch over to the new build. This exact same thing, but there's no chat interface. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to actually block my camera just so it doesn't cover the chat. Do you want to block yours as well, Daniel?
Yeah.
Just super.
Yes.
Cool. So jumping straight into it. The first thing I will do, because I mentioned we'll set up the logic first, and the reason I want to set up the logic is because of this bad boy. It's the WeWeb AI. Now, what the WeWeb AI allows you to do is generate designs. So if you want to add something to the page yourself, so if you wanted to, in the example I gave, drag a button onto the page, you're able to do that. But if you want AI to do it for you, you can. And so we'll use the AI to actually build the chat interface once we have the logic, because the nice thing about that is the data we get back from what Daniel has created, we can pass that into the AI. And because it has context of basically the data we'll be using, it can then build the designs in a much more catered way and even set up some of the bindings so that it's ready to go out of the box. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a kind of placeholder place for the chat, but we'll build the actual chat designs later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a side menu to the page. I'll drag it on here. Some elements give you variables like here. So it's giving us is open variable and a menu width variable. I will actually take these variables, but I'm just going to rename them. Yes. And so in the data tab here, we have access to the collections, but we also have access to all of the variables of our project. And we already have a side menu here. So it's the ones we've created. I've got this underscore copy, but I'm just going to call these chat is open. It's a Boolean, which is good. We want it to be true or false. And I will change menu width to chat width. Cool. And I'm just going to put these in a different folder quickly so we can better keep track of them.
I like that. That's some
best practices, yes. And I'll add one more variable, which will be for the messages. So I'll call it chat messages so we can keep track of the messages. And this will be an array. If you're not familiar with arrays, we have some great videos on this. But basically, array is a list of things. And because the messages is going to be a list of messages, we want it to be an array. So I'll put its type as array. Super. And I will also follow best practices and put this in our chat folder. Right, we have our side menu. It's currently blocking what was already there because I just need to change its position. So it was this one. I'll call it chat menu. And I want to change its position. So I will put it to be, it appears from the right already, super. And apparently it's on middle right. Unbind this, there we go. Super. And I just need to change some of the bindings now. So I will bind its display. I will bind it to the variables we created. So it will first be for the display. The chat is open variable, and we'll change this as we need to. And then I will change the width of the menu. It was already bound, but I just need to rebind it to our new variable for the chat width. I'll make it slightly bigger as well. You can't see the chat at the minute, but I'll change. Sorry, go on, Daniel.
I was just going to ask, oh yeah, exactly. The default, the value of the width. I was about to ask where we're declaring that. Awesome.
Exactly, yeah. So it was 240 before, but that was just because when I added the element and it came with those variables out of the box, that variable's default value was 240. So that's why it was 240, but I'll change this to be 320 for now, just so it's a bit wider.
Gotcha. Thank you, Matthew.
No worries. And I can test this now. So what I will do is, so right now we have its display bound, but this is false. But just to make sure it's operating correctly, I can go in, I can press this bug icon. It automatically opens the variables tab. And in real time, I can see the value of variables and I can change them. So this is very good for debugging. So for now, I could change this to true. We can see this is slid out, but it doesn't have any content, but we can see it is working as expected. And so if I set this to false, this should now disappear, which it does. Super. So we have that as a placeholder, and we'll get AI to do its magic shortly. So I'll set up the logic now. And the way I'm going to do this is with what's termed a global workflow. So I mentioned before that you can add logic to elements via this workflows tab. But there's a key distinction between workflows that you add here and workflows you create in this left menu. Any workflows you create on the right here, specifically to an element, they're local to that element. And so obviously if you click this button, it would run this workflow, but there's no other way to run this workflow. The only way to run it is to click the button. And if you wanted to duplicate this workflow for a different element, yes, you could right click, so you could click here, press copy, and then you could go onto this element and then paste it in. But if you're going to reuse these workflows across different elements, again, best practices, you want to do it as a global workflow, because that way, as this is already doing, you can then execute it from here, so you can use it in multiple places without having to recreate it every time. And then in the future, if you want to actually change the logic, you won't have to change it in every single place that you've manually created that workflow. So for this, since we might want to actually use this MCP query, let's say, in multiple places, it makes sense for us to create this as a global workflow, so we can call it from anywhere in the future. So I'll press new. I will follow best practices again. I'll call it MCP chat and add it to the MCP chat folder. I'll give it a name of call MCP. And it should be pretty simple, this, because really the only thing we need to do is actually make a request to Xano. So Daniel showed the endpoint that we had, which was getting all of the tools and taking in a query and then returning something. And so because I've added the Xano plugin, I have this request action. And here I have access to every single endpoint in my Xano instance. So here, as I said, we have every single API group. It was in the MCP client, I believe, right, Daniel?
Yep.
Super. And then it was the post chatbot.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, Matthew, I'm a stickler for naming, and I want to correct you and say we should call this send message.
Send message. Okay, cool.
Or yeah, or chatbot, send message.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
No worries. Call me up on the best practices anytime, please.
Well,
so what we'll want to do is, and again, the nice thing is that because it's hooked up to Xano, we have access to all of the endpoints by default, but it also pulls in all the parameters. So these are the parameters that were defined of the endpoint. And so they're here, and it's very easy for us to pass in inputs. And again, you can bind it. So you can dynamically pass in different values. Now, what I want to do first is make sure that this is all working. So if I pass, I can say the exact same thing. So before we said, what is our biggest deal? I'll pass this in as a query. For the prompt, I'll just say, you're a helpful assistant.
We forgot the word deal.
Okay, that is that is definitely a best practice. Thank you, Daniel. And for the conversation, I'll bind it. So what I want to bind this to, because it's never going to change per se, it's always going to be this chat messages variable that we'll add to shortly. But it's always going to be that, and it's empty for now, but we'll set it up so we have it for the future. And so I will press request. And if I switch to the logs tab, we should see our response, which we do. And I can open up data to see what is responded. And here we go. It says, your biggest deal is the one named Guavaberry Longan with the amount super. So it returned exactly what we expected. So this is working.
Awesome.
What we'll want to do one more thing. And that one more thing is we'll want to actually add whatever's been inputted into this chat messages variable, this list that's keeping track of the messages. So to make this happen in the actual context we want to, is if we're calling this workflow from somewhere. So for example, on this button, we're calling this global workflow. We'll need to define certain things because depending on where you call it from, you might want to pass in certain values. So for instance, whenever we call or whenever we want to chat with the chatbot, we need to actually send it our query. And as we saw here, this is hard coded right now, but we need to dynamically pass in the user query. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a parameter to the workflow. I'm going to just call it user query, like so. And all I'm going to do now is get rid of this hard coded value, press the binding icon. In this lightning bolt tab, I can see all of the defined parameters. And so I'll just pass in the parameter. And so what this means is we can call the workflow, we can pass in a parameter. Parameter will be given to the MCP in this case, and it works as expected. And so if I was to change the test value here, if I then switch back to here, check what's bound, we can see it dynamically updates to be whatever is input into that parameter. Fantastic.
I love that. That's awesome.
And so what I will do is I'm just going to quickly add 2 more actions. I want to add to the chat messages. So I'm just going to insert at the end. This is going to be an object. Again, if you aren't familiar with kind of how data works from a web development perspective, this might be a bit confusing, but all an object is, it's kind of a nice way to bundle related information. It's kind of like if you had a shopping basket, you might have a list of items in your basket, but each item has its own specific information. So each product in your basket would be an individual object, but you would have a list of items. So in this case, we want to add one specific thing to our list of messages. So I'm going to add certain pieces of data. So I'm going to say the role is user because it's us that will first add something here. And I'm going to say the content is whatever's been input, so the user query, and just close that off. So it returns something like this. And I'm just going to duplicate this. And all I'm going to do is add the response from the AI. And I'll call it the assistant. And like the parameters, we have obviously access to the parameters in this bolt tab. But in the context of a workflow, you have access to previous actions. So here we have the result that we got from our query. And so what I can do is here, I'm just going to pass in whatever we get back from the assistant. So in theory, if I go through and I test this now, so I'll say the exact same thing. So what is our biggest deal as the test parameter? I can press test to run this workflow from A to Z. And what I expect to happen is I expect for my message to get added to chat messages. We pass it to the chatbot. The chatbot gives us a response, and that response is then added to our list of chat messages also. So if I open up the chat messages and test this, super, it's added. We've sent it to Xano. We're waiting for a response. And when we get that response, it should be added here. And there we go. It works as expected. So what I'll do now quickly is I'll reset this. And now we can get into the real fun stuff. So I will, as before, I'm going to, so the chat is already open. That's good. That's what we want. I'll go to our chat menu element. Here's the menu. It's currently empty. But what I will do is I'll make this a full width. So I want it to be 100 VH, which means it just takes up the entire available height of the screen. I'll go to AI mode, and this is really where the magic happens. So I'm going to just give the AI a prompt of what I want it to build. So I'm going to say, build us a chat interface. But if you wanted to, you could actually pass in screenshots. So there's this paperclip icon. If you click this, it gives you a file uploader. You can pass in any images you like, or you can just copy and paste in images, and it will then use those as a reference. I won't do it this time, but if you want to, you can. And you can pass in data as context. And this is really why I wanted to set up the logic beforehand, because now what I can do is I can actually, this was a mistake. Let me run this once more. So we have some example data to give it. So I'm just going to test this again so that our chat messages array has actually some content. There we go, super. And what I will do in the chat interface with our AI is I'm going to pass in that chat messages data. And so now, because I'm giving this data, one, the AI has better context of what it is we want to do, because it can look at that and say, okay, there's a user message, there's an assistant message. I kind of have a better understanding of what kind of designs I need to create. But also in those designs it creates, it will automatically set up the bindings so that the messages, or so that this chat messages variable is used. So I have a pre-cooked prompt from before that I'm just going to copy and paste in, but I will explain what's going on. So here, I'm just saying inside this menu div, so when you click on an element, as we did with this menu, it gets passed in as context, which is good if you want it to make specific edits or add things to certain elements, which we do here. We wanted to add it inside this menu div. So I'm saying inside this menu div, I want to create a chat interface. It will be hooked up to the MCP on our Xano backend, and the users will be able to chat with it in plain language to ask questions about the data and perform actions. I'm not saying this so it sets up any kind of logic. I'm also saying this so it has some kind of context as to what it should put into the designs. And here, I've just said I've attached the chat messages data that I will be using for you to have as context. And so now, if I pass this in, it should create a lovely chat interface for us. And I also expect it to use this chat messages variable by default and set up a lot of the bindings that we need.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
So while this is cooking, I wanted to clarify something from earlier. So we keep asking the AI, get our biggest deal.
Mm-hmm.
And the tool that we set up is just returning the entire list of deals. So it's intelligently filtering those deals based off of the entire list and finding that largest deal.
So it's getting everything.
Yeah. I mean, we can even verify it on the Xano side with the tool call history.
Nice. So there was a bit of a hiccup. It's not perfect right now. So I'm just going to pass in the prompt again in a new chat window. I think maybe the context I gave it before might have thrown it off. So let's see. Fingers crossed it works a bit better this time.
That's the nice thing about like both of our platforms, right? Is that, we can actually build it out manually and have full control over it. But we could also use AI to get it done quickly or help us build something that we're not sure how to build, right?
Yeah. And the nice, so it's not behaving right now, but what I can do is, the nice thing about this is, because as you said, this sits inside the WeWeb editor. If it's not behaving, I can kind of think outside the box to get it to work. So what I can do is I'm going to refresh just in case, because I've had this tab open for a while and we're switching back and forth. There might be an issue with it.
Yeah.
And I will open back up.
The classic, did you turn it off? Back on again.
Yeah, if it doesn't work, I'll start hitting my laptop with a hammer. Cool. And so I'm not going to specify menu. I'm just going to pass in the prompt I had. I am going to run this again, just so I have some test data. And I'm just going to say this. And I honestly have no idea where it's going to put this, but because it's all inside the editor, as long as it creates it, I can simply copy and paste it into this sidebar menu.
That's awesome.
And in truth, because I haven't specified where to put it, it might literally just replace our entire page with whatever it generates. But even if it does that, I should be able to just copy it, undo what it did, and then paste in what it creates into somewhere else.
So tell me, why did it create new variables? Or
That's a good question, Daniel. I'm not too sure. Because it's they're identical to the ones that we have. Okay, it's really not behaving itself. I'm not too sure why. Let me try it once more here. Great chat interface. Let me give it, I'll give it this once more. If it really doesn't behave itself, I won't pass in our data as context because maybe it's just throwing it off.
either way, how long would it take you to build it from scratch by hand? No AI.
It would take maybe like half an hour from scratch.
Okay.
I really hope this works because it's worked every single time I've tried this, and it saved it's pretty much one-shotted it. Okay, fingers crossed. I think there we go. Okay, super.
Oh, it's just the classic demo curse.
Yeah, exactly. I promised that in the entire time of testing, I never had this. So it's perfect that it happens now, but it's doing its thing. And there we can see it's already actually bound what's in the chat messages. So it took a few tries, but it's doing what was needed, which is good.
Woohoo!
So in the current logic, and we're looking to improve this right now. So the workflow generations aren't perfect. It's more so the designs that are better. And I can promise you this works way more often than you may think if this is your first time seeing AI. As I said in testing, didn't have any of these problems. So it'll work much better for you from a design perspective, I promise. But in terms of the logic generation, it's not perfect right now. So it will give you these workflows that it can generate. And if we do execute these, it will generate the workflows. I can perhaps show this for the clear chat. So let's see, whenever I hover over this, it will tell me what it's going to do. And so we can see the description is we'll clear all messages from the chat messages array. Super. I do actually want this one because when I hover over this, we can see it actually highlights this clear element. So that says it's going to create it for that element. So I'm going to execute this one because it will just save us some time. And it did create another chat messages array prior. So if it uses the wrong one, I can just swap it out for the correct one. So it will generate that workflow. It will add the needed actions as we see. We can see it's replacing it, but all it's doing is adding in an empty array. So it's basically resetting it. And just in case it's added it to the wrong one, I'm just going to get rid of this empty one here because this was the one it created. And I just want to know which one is the correct one to be working with, like so. And so I will just do what it did there, but I want to reset the array. So I'm just going to make it an empty array like so, super. And in here, we have our items and we want it to be these chat messages. I think I might have actually did I delete the wrong one there? No, okay, so they added the default values. Apologies, I deleted the wrong one. The nice thing again is I can undo it. So I delete the wrong one, so I can undo this, and I'm just going to delete this one. This is the one it created. Okay, cool. So I'll delete these. And I guess this is a good time to showcase the manual side. So it's replacing all of these. Okay, super. So that's working as it should. And just to make sure that it set up these bindings correctly, so I can click into here. Currently, this is an empty list. And whenever you have elements inside of a bound list, like so, we have some designs in here, but because the list that it's bound to is empty, so there's nothing in the chat messages right now, it doesn't show anything here, and so it won't show any of the designs. But as we saw, the AI automatically hooked it up to our variable. So if I run this in isolation again, if I just press test, so we add something to that chat messages, we can see it adds that in. Cool. So that's all set up for us. And so the only thing I need to do finally is hook up this send message button to our global workflow. So I created a workflow on the button. I will execute workflow. It was the send message to chatbot.
Yeah.
I'll give this input a better name. So I'll just say chat input. And so now in this workflow, I can call this and I can dynamically pass in a different user query. I'll bind it to the chat input value. It's blank right now because the input was blank. But just to show this, if I say, what different prompt could I give it, you reckon, Daniel?
Let's do something a little tough. Like, do you notice any trends in our deals?
Okay. And just before I run this, I will double check that it's passing in the correct data here. So if I check the binding, yep, it's passing that in. And so if I send this, our message gets added. We now wait for a response.
It's
And when
gonna it's gonna come up with all the deal names have to do with fruit.
Here's an overview of the trends in your deals based on the data you provided. Deal stages, there is a healthy distribution across different deals. Many deals are in the negotiation and proposal sent stages. And you know what, while I'm doing this, I'm going to, so because we bound the chat width to this variable, I'm just going to make this a bit bigger for us, like so.
Dude, this is actually like really valuable insights.
Yes. And I'm also, this is a bit, needs a bit more separation. So manually, for what the AI did, I'm just going to give it a left border. And let's give it a nice little background shadow.
Mark Peterson in the chat is asking if we could stream the response to the UI. Definitely, Mark.
Yeah.
We'll have to do that in next stream. And like, since we're on the topic about next stream, I really wanted us to be able to show, like maybe the name of the tool the AI is using, or maybe even make it more dynamic in that it'll return a list of the records it found, which could be clickable and take you to another part of the application. Or maybe next time what we do is we build the add new deal MCP tool in Xano, and then whenever we tell the AI, about all this deal information, and we hit send, it'll, instead of automatically just creating that deal, like imagine if it opened up a new modal and it had all the deal information right there for you, so you could approve it before it actually creates it in the database.
Shall we, I know we've run over slightly, Daniel, shall we very quickly within 5 minutes, just to showcase what you mean, but how it could be expanded upon in a future stream? Do you want to add quickly an add company task? And then we can quickly show a CRUD operation with it. But obviously, as you said, in a future stream, we can add some kind of human in the loop feature.
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's do it. I mean,
Super.
it's just so quick. Like, I think that's the thing about, developing like this is, you said add a company.
Yes. So if a task to add a company, and then we can call it from there, from in WeWeb.
Got to select the right server. Did I? Or did I already create one? No, I didn't. Okay, there we go. Let's just double check everything is right. Cool.
Super.
Right. Go ahead, ship it.
And so now back in WeWeb, because Daniel just published it straight to the toolkit, and we don't have to change the endpoint at all. The endpoint just gets all of the tools. If I was to now say, add a company called WeWeb, it is in the IT industry, and its website is weweb.io.
On it, I would love if you actually deleted that last sentence about the
To see if it guesses it. Let's see.
Let's see.
So it didn't make the assumption, unfortunately, but it still added it. So if I now go to the companies tab, we can see WeWeb at the bottom. So it did indeed add it.
See, and honestly, it probably should have figured it out, because I already know that ChatGPT knows about WeWeb, and it also knows about Xano, because I think both of our platforms has been experiencing a large number of users that have like come from LLM chats.
Yes.
That they'd never heard about us before.
I will turn my camera back on since we're now off the chat. But yes, so
I'll join you.
So that was, I mean, you can do a ton of stuff with it. And I think in a future stream, it would be fantastic to showcase some of the CRUD operations, but introduce some kind of human in the loop feature where maybe you ask it to add a company, it then specifies what it's actually going to add and asks you to approve it. Or as you said, what would be very cool is like when we ask, what is the biggest deal? Instead of just giving all of the information, we can add something on the WeWeb side, which is like some kind of artifact where you can click on it, it opens a detail modal, some kind of more interactivity. I think it'd be very cool.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said earlier, the agent that we had built out was just the most basic version of an agent. And so what we'll show in the future, I'm not sure if it's going to be in the next one or the one after, but we're going to show how it will basically be able to multi-tool calling. So it'll start looping through essentially that endpoint that you saw, and it will be able to go and get deal information. It'll be able to go and do something else, and it'll start figuring out, basically it'll plan out what tools it wants to use and how it's going to use them. And once it has that new information from each and every tool after its use, then it can perform a different task. But yeah, I think we had one more question in the chat that was a really easy one. So Joel Lee asked, so
was it part 2 broad strokes? How would you add a security layer? How would you add a security layer such that depending on the current WeWeb user, they only have access to X set of tools in Xano? That's probably it. That's on your side, right? Because it would just be related to the user making the call.
Yeah, exactly. Because we already, because it sits behind Xano authentication, and then we have that incredible integration with WeWeb for the auth system. So it basically knows already who the user is. Like, so for example, if you were creating a record in a table that required it to store like that person's user ID, think multi-tenant architecture, then it'll automatically know who's to record it under. And that's the same way with a little bit additional logic. You could do what I was talking about earlier in the stream, is role-based access control and kind of restricting tools and servers to certain users.
Yes. Just going through it now, I saw there was also a question from Luis, and he asked the prompts I gave to WeWeb AI. He wondered why I enclosed them in stars. And there was no specific reason for that, Louise. It was just because I was copying it from a different page on my other tab to this page. And because it had formatting on the other tab, it was in italics that it had those stars. So it doesn't do anything. There wasn't a specific reason I was doing that. It's just because I was copying and pasting it from a differently formatted page. Wow, there's a lot of good responses to this. Rally says, I left my project idle for a few months. So much has changed. It's making me excited to build more things all over again. Yes, I had the same when Daniel showed this to me. and it opened that Pandora's box of what can be done. I had a similar response. Quickly going through this, another question from Irrigation Checkups. I have a WeWeb and Xano subscription. Do I also need subscriptions to the various AI models to set this up in my app? Yes, you would, right, Daniel?
Yep, 100%. We don't, we just offer you like the ability to integrate with whatever LLM you want through the external API requests, but you do need to go and set up an account and get an API key. And you can do this. There's a bunch of different service providers out there that basically allow you to use one API key to access a number of different models. So yeah.
Super. There's just a few questions to run through quickly. This is a very broad one. I have a few things to mention on the WeWeb side, Daniel. I don't know if you do. It was from Alberto. He said, hi, everyone. What are the limitations you have right now that might come soon? I have a few I can mention on our side related to the AI. I don't know if there's any you wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, definitely. So next week, we're going to be having an update, a new release. And one of the limitations I had when I was basically building out these MCP servers for my end users as a builder in Xano. So one thing, especially with the third-party clients, they just haven't caught up yet to the latest standard. So for example, if you've tried to use MCP servers with Claude Desktop, you have to, configure like Claude Desktop. There's a config file that you paste some stuff into, and you can do it with remote MCP servers and authentication. But the limitation there was that your end users, your Xano end users, would need to paste their token into that file. And there's no way to kind of serve that token to your users, right? It's all happening behind the scenes. So we are going to have a new way to allow you to do this more easily until the mainstream clients catch up. But for example, what we showed today, there is no limitation because it's already, it's happening behind the scenes with the user authentication token. It's just a limitation if you want to connect to a third-party client.
Amazing. Super. Very quick on the WeWeb side. I think so for designs, the AI is fantastic right now. There was a few hiccups we saw, but it's very rare. In the entirety of testing, I didn't have any problems with it. So of course it shows its head in the stream, but for designs, generally it's fantastic. The only, I guess, downside, I wouldn't say downside, it falls short in terms of logic and generating workflows. And internally, we're very much aware of that. And we're working very hard behind the scenes to create an improved version for generating workflows and logic. And fingers crossed we can release it in the coming weeks. And having tried it in staging, it's crazy. Like, it's basically what we created today. I tried it in our staging and it generated it in a single prompt. So it's very promising. So fingers crossed we can create that or release that new version within the coming weeks.
Hook it up, Matthew. I thought, what's going on?
I'll try and I'll message a few people.
No, hey, we have some WeWeb team members who are testing out Xano script right now.
Okay, there's peer pressure. I see how this goes. Very quickly then, so Mark said, this was a very good point from Mark actually. He mentioned for the fact it didn't add the company URL. Maybe we need to add something in the instructions to say if you don't have something, take a guess. So that's a very good point, Mark.
Yeah, great addition right there.
Super. And then finally, positive points all around. Adam says, crazy thing, we can get rid of expensive CRM apps with this combo. And Cloudplex says this is genuinely game-changing. I'm stunned. Love it. Yeah, it's. Woo! I look forward to seeing what people do with this because, as we said, it's just a Pandora's box of what you can do.
Definitely, and I can't wait for the next time we get to be on stream together and show you guys how to take this even further. I was talking to Matthew about this, and I was like, "Man, we could take this all the way and make this a multi-part series." So let us know if you'd like us to do that because you can apply what you're learning here to whatever type of product you're building. And the coolest part about this is you don't even have to build all the integrations yourself because you can basically allow your users to connect to your MCP server as well as other third-party MCP servers. and they could use your product in conjunction with whatever they want.
Yeah, I'd be very interested and very excited for us to do multi-part on this, because whatever someone wants, we can pretty much build it. If they want, as we mentioned, some kind of Slack integration where you say, hey, message XYZ with whatever, we can make that happen. Maybe we can add some kind of human in the loop to adding companies or some kind of CRUD actions. So much we can do. So that would be very cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, everyone. And thank you so much to the WeWeb team. And looking forward to doing the next one.
Super. Likewise. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you to everyone behind the scenes on your side who made this happen. Fingers crossed we can do it again.
Awesome.
Super.
Take
Cheers,
care,
everyone.
everyone.